The radar does not see them coming the way it sees a drone. A Shad 136 has an engine. The engine produces heat, produces acoustic signature, produces a radar return from its airframe as it cruises at 190 kilometers per hour. The SPY-6 sees it from 80 to 100 kilometers away and builds a track file across dozens of radar sweeps. The engagement timeline is measured in minutes. The defensive layers have time to sequence, to select, to allocate interceptors with consideration of which ring handles which threat. An unguided 122mm artillery rocket fired from a BM-21 Grad multiple launch system has none of that. No engine during flight, no thermal signature above ambient temperature, no active guidance seeker emitting a signal. Its radar cross-section in flight is approximately 0.006 square meters, smaller than a large seabird, smaller than many of the wave-return false contacts that the C-clutter filter removes automatically. The SPY-6 does see it, but only when the ballistic arc reaches an altitude where the radar can distinguish the contact from the sea surface clutter. Against a rocket fired at minimum range at maximum elevation, the detection to impact timeline is not minutes. It is measured in seconds. The destroyer is operating in the Red Sea, 34 nautical miles west of the Yemeni coast, on an anti-smuggling interdiction patrol in the southern shipping corridor. 34 nautical miles, the maximum range of a BM-21 Grad firing standard. 9 M22 rockets is 20 kilometers. The ship is outside that range, outside it by 43 kilometers. At 4:11 a.m., the Houthis fired Falak 2 rockets. The Falak 2 is an Iranian-developed 333mm unguided spin-stabilized rocket. Maximum range, 75 kilometers. Cost per round, approximately $3,500 to $6,000 in current production estimates. No guidance, no seeker, no GPS. The Falak 2 is aimed at a target grid coordinate that the launch crew computes using basic trigonometry, atmospheric ballistic tables, and an observation that the ship has been maintaining a consistent patrol pattern for the past 72 hours. The rocket goes where the math says the ship will be when the rocket arrives. The SPY-6 detected the launch signatures at 4:11 a.m. plus 8 seconds. The boost phase plumes were visible to the radar's track algorithm at an altitude of 400 meters, approximately 3 seconds into their flight. Initial track assessment. Ballistic contacts bearing 068, count uncertain, altitude climbing, no active guidance emissions detected. Count uncertain. In the first 8 seconds of SPY-6 contact with the rocket salvo, the radar had resolved 12 definite track files and assessed an additional 8 probable contacts. The probable contacts were borderline because the Falak 2's small radar cross-section during ballistic flight, combined with the clutter environment and the 0.4-second radar sweep cycle, produced intermittent detections on some rockets that the track algorithm could not immediately commit to firm tracks. 20 contacts minimum. Possible 28, all ballistic, all bearing 068. Time to impact at computed current ship position. The fire control computer ran the ballistic solutions and displayed the results in descending order. Shortest time to impact on any track, 47 seconds. Longest, 68 seconds. 47 seconds from detection to the first rounds arriving. The watch team had never trained for a 47-second response window against a massed rocket salvo. Not because the scenario had not been wargamed, because the doctrine for this scenario, defending against unguided rocket artillery, had been developed in the context of land-based Patriot batteries and counter-rocket artillery mortar systems, with response times measured in under 10 seconds using automated engagement. The surface ship equivalent, using SM-2 in anti-ballistic surface mode and CIWS as the terminal layer, had never been fully validated against a simultaneous salvo of 20 or more contacts at this range to impact timeline. The TAO authorized weapons free in 4.1 seconds. Running count: 4:11 a.m., second 8. 12 confirmed ballistic contacts, 8 probable. Bearing 068, range 44 to 49 kilometers ascending. Time to first impact: 47 seconds on closest track. SM-2, anti-ballistic engagement mode initiating. CIWS, both mounts activating autonomous. SM-68, not applicable to ballistic low RCS contacts at this range. ESSM, 32, limited ballistic engagement mode. Cost, $0. Time elapsed, 8 seconds. The SM-2 was the only weapon in the ship's inventory with a validated anti-ballistic engagement mode against rocket-class contacts. Its standard anti-air mode, guided by semi-active radar illumination, was not well suited to a 47-second engagement timeline against 20 simultaneous contacts with radar cross-sections of 0.006 square meters. But the SM-2 Block 3B had been specifically upgraded for the cruise missile and rocket defense role, with a fuse designed to detonate against small cross-section contacts and an engagement mode that used the ship's fire control radar in a burst track configuration rather than continuous illumination, trading illumination quality for the faster cycling time needed to engage multiple ballistic contacts in a compressed timeline. The fire control system allocated SM-2 cells against the 12 confirmed tracks. At 42 seconds remaining to first impact, the first 4 SM-2 cells launched. Time of flight to intercept at mid-course: 18 to 24 seconds, depending on which track. That meant interceptors were arriving at the mid-course of the rocket trajectories with 18 to 26 seconds remaining before the rockets impacted. The engagement window was compressed to the point where the fire control system's allocation algorithm was making targeting decisions at 0.4-second cycles against contacts whose flight time was measured in the same units. SM-2 cells 1 through 4 launched at 4:11 a.m. plus 12 seconds, 4 interceptors against 4 confirmed tracks. Simultaneously, the CIWS mounts entered full autonomous mode. At 44 seconds remaining to first impact, the CIWS was not yet in engagement range. The rockets were still at 18 to 22 kilometers altitude on their ballistic arc. But the CIWS director was tracking every contact the radar was holding, computing the descent trajectories, projecting intercept geometries for when the rockets entered the 1.5-kilometer engagement envelope. With 20 simultaneous contacts arriving in a 21-second window at the end of their ballistic arcs, the CIWS would have approximately 1 second per contact to engage each rocket on the terminal descent. At 4,500 rounds per minute and 1-second engagement windows, each contact would receive approximately 75 rounds. The terminal descent geometry was steep, rockets approaching at a 45 to 60-degree descent angle from near vertical impact was the most challenging CIWS engagement geometry, requiring the barrel to point nearly straight up for contacts arriving directly overhead rather than on a horizontal approach. Running count: 4:11 a.m., second 15, 12 confirmed plus 8 probable contacts. SM 2x4 in flight. CIWS, both mounts autonomous, tracking all contacts, computing terminal descent geometry. 36 seconds to first impact. SM-2, 20 remaining. ESSM 32. Cost $4.8 million. Time 15 seconds. The SM-2 first salvo results arrived at 4:11 a.m. plus 34 seconds to 22 seconds after launch at the mid-course intercept point. 2 confirmed intercepts. 2 misses. The SM-2's burst track illumination mode had maintained contact quality on 2 of the 4 tracks through the full engagement. On 2 tracks, the burst track had lost contact quality during the 8-second window between last radar sweep and intercept point. The rocket's small cross-section had produced too few detections to maintain a reliable, extrapolated track, and the SM-2 seeker had arrived at the predicted intercept point to find that the actual rocket was 18 to 22 meters from the predicted position. Proximity fuse outside lethal radius. Miss. 18 confirmed contacts remained inbound. Time to first impact, 13 seconds. Running count. 4:11 a.m., second 38, SM-2 first, salvo. 4 launched, 2 intercepts, 2 misses, 18 contacts remaining. 13 seconds to first impact. SM-2, 20 remaining. CIWS both mounts. Tracking terminal descent trajectories. Cost, $4.8 million. Time, 38 seconds. SM-2 cells 5 through 12. 8 more launches. The track picture now had 20 firm contacts. The probable contacts from the initial sweep had resolved into confirmed tracks as the rockets descended through the radar's optimal altitude band. 4 SM-2 each against 2 paired tracks, where the rockets were close enough in bearing to use a single launch against the pair using the anti-proximity fuse mode. The other 4 SM-2 single-targeted against 4 solo contacts. 4 paired proximity detonations, 3 effective, 1 outside radius, 4 single intercepts, 3 confirmed, 1 miss, 7 contacts neutralized from 8 SM-2, 11 contacts remaining. Time to first impact, 4 seconds. Running count, 4:11 a.m., second 43, 11 contacts. CIWS, both mounts, terminal engagement initiating. SM-2, 12 remaining. ESSM, 32. 4 seconds to first contact entering CIWS engagement ring. 11 contacts will arrive in a 19-second window. Cost, $14.4 million. Time, 43 seconds. CIWS forward began engagement at 4:11 a.m. plus 47 seconds. Exactly at the predicted time to impact for the closest track. The first rocket arrived near vertically. Descent angle 54 degrees from horizontal. The CIWS barrel had elevated to 62 degrees above horizontal to intercept the contact at 1,100 meters slant range. The burst geometry at this elevation angle placed the 20-millimeter rounds in a cone pointing nearly straight up, and the rocket was descending through that cone. Burst, 0.9 seconds, 67 rounds. The rocket's warhead was struck at 900 meters altitude, approximately 640 meters above the water surface. Warhead detonation at 900 meters. The blast was directed downward toward the ship and outward in a fragmentation sphere. At 640 meters altitude, the fragments were dispersed across a wide radius, but their terminal velocity was reduced by atmospheric drag. Fragments reached the forward deck and the forward mass structure. 17 impacts cataloged in the post-engagement assessment, none penetrating below deck or into any structural system. The second rocket arrived 1.8 seconds after the first. CIWS forward had already rotated 11 degrees and re-elevated to 58 degrees. Burst on the second contact, 0.7 seconds, 52 rounds. Intercept at 1,200 meters altitude. Warhead detonation above the ship. Fragments descending, reaching the weather deck and the forward sensor housing. 14 additional fragment impacts. Third contact, CIWS aft acquired, while CIWS forward was engaging the second. The third rocket was on a bearing 14 degrees south of the previous 2. It was approaching from slightly further south, a different launch position or slightly different barrel elevation from the same launch position. CIWS aft burst, 1.1 seconds, 82 rounds. Intercept at 780 meters altitude. Warhead detonation closest to the ship so far, 540 meters above the hull. Fragments reached the aft deck, the aft antenna farm, and the CIWS aft mount housing itself. The CIWS aft housing took 3 fragment impacts on the exterior dome. The mount continued functioning. The fragments had struck the outer housing, not the tracking radar or the barrel mechanism. Running count, 4:12 a.m., second 65. 8 contacts remaining. CIWS forward, 76%. CIWS aft, 72%. 3 fragment impacts on housing, functioning. SM2, 12. ESSM, 32. 3 warhead detonations, 900 meters, 1,200 meters, 780 meters altitude. Fragment damage, forward deck, forward mast, aft deck, aft antenna farm. No structural penetration, no personnel injuries. Cost, $14.4 million. Time, 65 seconds. 8 contacts remaining, arriving in a 15-second window. The CIWS mounts worked through the sequence with the mechanical efficiency of autonomous systems. No hesitation, no decision latency, no consideration of the fragment damage they had already taken. 4th contact. CIWS forward, burst 0.8 seconds, intercept at 1,050 meters altitude. Warhead detonation, more fragments. 5th contact. CIWS aft, burst 0.9 seconds, intercept at 1,100 meters. 6th contact. CIWS forward, the 3rd consecutive engagement at near maximum barrel elevation angle, the system performing at the edge of its elevation specification, but within the rated parameters. Burst, 1.2 seconds, 90 rounds. Intercept at 940 meters. 7th and 8th contacts arrive simultaneously, 0.4 seconds apart, from slightly divergent bearings. Each CIWS mount engaged 1, CIWS forward, burst on contact 7 at 1,400 meters altitude, intercept confirmed. CIWS aft, burst on contact 8, 0.9 seconds. The contact's descent angle was steeper than the others, 61 degrees from horizontal, the rocket arriving almost directly overhead. The CIWS aft barrel elevated to 71 degrees, 1 degree inside the system's maximum elevation specification. Burst, 0.7 seconds, 52 rounds. Fragmented at 1,600 meters altitude. Warhead did not initiate structural fragmentation of the rocket body without triggering the impact fuse. Running count, 4:12 a.m., second 72, 3 contacts remaining. CIWS forward, 73%. CIWS aft, 67%, 3 fragments on housing. SM2, 12. 8 warhead detonations completed above ship. Lowest altitude detonation, 640 meters. Fragment damage accumulating forward deck, mast, aft antenna. Cost, $14.4 million. Time, 72 seconds. Contacts, 9 through 11. 3 remaining rockets arriving in the last 4 seconds of the salvo. SM2 cells, 13 through 15 against 3 contacts at longer range, whose descent trajectories were still in the mid-course phase. These were the rockets with the 68-second timed impact from first detection. The longest range launches in the salvo, still 8 to 12 seconds from the terminal descent. 2 SM2 intercepts, 1 missed, 1 contact entering terminal descent. CIWS forward. Acquired the final rocket at 1,800 meters altitude. Burst, 1.4 seconds, 105 rounds. Intercept at 1,500 meters. Warhead detonated. Fragments reached the ship. The largest fragment impacted the forward SPY-6 waveguide conduit, the same conduit that had been assessed as non-critical in previous engagements, and this time the fragment was large enough to penetrate the conduit housing. The SPY-6 forward sector degraded to 55% scan coverage. Radar continued operating in degraded mode. At 4:12 a.m. plus 89 seconds, the SPY-6 confirmed no further ballistic contacts in the engagement corridor. All 20 confirmed contacts had been engaged. The salvo was complete. Total duration from first radar detection to final intercept, 81 seconds. Running count, 4:12 a.m., second 89. All 20 contacts engaged. Intercept assessment, 9 confirmed neutralized by SM-2, 10 warhead detonations at altitude by CIWS, all above 640 meters, 1 structural fragmentation, no detonation. No contact reached the hull. SPY-6 forward sector, 55% degraded. Fragment damage, forward deck, mast, aft antenna farm, CIWS aft housing, SM-2, 9 remaining. ESSM, 32 unused. SM-6, 8 unused. RAM, 21 unused. CIWS forward, 69%. CIWS aft, 64%. Cost, $25.8 million. Time, 81 seconds. Running count, 4:12 a.m., second 89. All 20 contacts neutralized. SM-2, 9 remaining. ESSM, 32 unused. SM-6, 8 unused. RAM, 21 unused. CIWS forward, 69%. CIWS aft, 64%. SPY-6 forward sector degraded to 55%. 10 warhead detonations above ship, 640 to 1,600 meters altitude. 3 crew minor injuries. Cost, $25.8 million. Total engagement duration, 81 seconds. No rocket had reached the hull. Every rocket that had survived SM-2 intercept had been engaged by CIWS, detonating above the ship rather than against it. The warhead detonations at 640 to 1,600 meters altitude had sent fragments downward at terminal velocity, and those fragments had reached the ship. The difference between a warhead detonating at 640 meters overhead and a warhead detonating on the hull was not academic. It was the difference between fragment damage and catastrophic structural failure. But 640 meters was closer than the crew would have preferred, and the fragment damage was real. The damage assessment at 5:30 a.m. compiled the full picture. Forward deck, 23 fragment impacts of varying sizes, largest creating a 12-centimeter penetration through a non-structural deck plate. Forward mast, 11 impacts, 1 severing the primary VHF antenna, 2 impacting the IFF antenna array. SPY-6 forward waveguide conduit, penetrated by a single 40mm fragment, forward sector at 55% operational capacity. Full repair requiring dry dock. Aft deck, 18 fragment impacts, cosmetic and minor structural. Aft antenna farm, 4 impacts, secondary communications antenna damaged, primary antenna intact. CIWS aft housing, 3 fragment impacts on outer dome, no internal damage. 5-inch gun muzzle blast shield. 2 fragment impacts, non-structural. Personnel, 3 crew members on the weather deck at the time of engagement had been ordered below at the general alarm, but the engagement timeline of 81 seconds from general alarm to last detonation had not provided sufficient time for all watchstanders to reach below-deck spaces. 2 crew members on the 0-1 level sustained lacerations from fragment spray. Both treated and returned to duty within 2 hours. 1 crew member on the bridge wing sustained a minor concussion from the concussive overpressure of the detonation at 640 meters, treated and assessed for duty. 3 injured. No serious injuries. The ship was mobile and combat operational in most respects. The SPY-6 degradation was the most significant operational impact. At 55% forward sector coverage, the ship's long-range air search capability was measurably reduced in the northern Bering Arc. The magazine assessment at 5:45 a.m., SM-6, 8 of 8, fully loaded, unused. The SM-6 had no reliable engagement mode against a 0.006 square meter contact on a ballistic arc with 47 seconds of warning time. SM-2, 15 of 24 remaining, 9 expended, 3 effective SM-2+6 CIWS supported intercepts. ESSM, 32 of 32, unused. RAM, 21 of 21, unused. CIWS forward, 69%. CIWS aft, 64%. The inventory picture that the supply officer would document at 7 a.m. had a quality that was, by this point in the analysis series, familiar. The most expensive weapons were fully loaded and entirely irrelevant to the engagement. The SM-6 at $2.1 million each, the SM-2 cells at $1.2 million each, the ESSM at $450,000 per round, none of them had been optimally designed for what had just happened. The adversary had fired rockets, not cruise missiles, not precision-guided munitions. Rockets, the same fundamental technology as the projectile that had been used in combat since the 14th century, now manufactured in lots of 10,000 and stored in warehouses across Yemen's coastal provinces. The Falak II cost $4,000 per round in current market estimates. 20 rounds, $80,000 total. The U.S. had responded with SM-2 interceptors at $1.2 million each. 9 SM-2 expended, $10.8 million. CIWS ammunition, approximately 0.5-second average burst duration across 11 engagements, $41,000. Total U.S. munitions expenditure, $25.8 million. Exchange ratio 323 to 1 in the adversary's favor, 323. The highest exchange ratio in this entire analysis series by a factor greater than 3. Higher than the GPS-jammed engagement at 94 to 1. Higher than the Arctic storm at 85 to 1. Higher than the AI swarm engagement at 73 to 1. $323 spent by the defense for every dollar spent by the adversary. The ratio was not a failure of the defense. The defense had worked. Every rocket had been intercepted. No round had reached the hull. By every outcome metric, the engagement had succeeded. The exchange ratio was 323 to 1 because the adversary had fired a $4,000 rocket that required a $1.2 million interceptor to stop at range, and there was no cheaper option. The SM-2 had been the only available weapon with a validated anti-ballistic engagement mode against this contact type at this timeline. Using CIWS alone against 20 simultaneous near-vertical ballistic contacts would have resulted in contacts reaching the hull before the mounts could cycle through the full salvo. The supply officer noted the margin that most clearly described the engagement. The adversary had fired 20 rockets. If they had fired 30, the CIWS mounts would have been engaged through their full ammunition capacity before all contacts were intercepted. If they had fired 40, contacts would have reached the hull. The threshold at which the engagement outcome changed from success to hull impact was approximately 22 to 26 rockets, the number that exhausted both CIWS mounts before the last contacts were in the engagement queue. 20 rockets, success. 26 rockets, possible hull impact. The difference in adversary cost, $24,000. The Houthis had the launch capacity to fire 26 rockets. They had fired 20. Whether that was deliberate restraint, a calibrated test of engagement capacity, rather than a maximum effort strike, or coincidence was not determinable from the engagement data. The intelligence assessment noted it without resolution. The tactical significance was clear regardless of the adversary's intent. The engagement had revealed the approximate capacity threshold of a single destroyer against a massed rocket salvo, had done so at a cost of $80,000 and had produced detailed data on the ship's SM-2 intercept rate, CIWS cycling tempo, and the altitude at which detonations produced structural fragment effects. Emergency resupply transmitted at 6:32 a.m. SM-2 priority. SPY-6 conduit repair assessment requested. Shipyard evaluation required for full repair, estimated 14 to 21 days out of service. Operational degradation from 55% forward sector. Significant but manageable with adjusted patrol geometry. ETA for SM-2 replenishment, 4 days. The Houthis had fired $80,000 in rockets. The ship had spent $25.8 million to stop them. Was operating with a degraded radar, 3 injured crew members, and multiple fragment impacts across the weather deck and antenna farm, and would need 15 SM-2 rounds delivered in 4 days to restore its anti-ballistic intercept capacity. For $80,000, the adversary had temporarily degraded the ship's primary radar in one sector, revealed the ship's engagement capacity ceiling against rocket salvos, and forced a 4-day logistical response. They still had trucks full of rockets. Engagement summary. Red Sea, 4:11 a.m. to 4:12 a.m. local. Duration, 81 seconds. Inbound contacts, 20 Falak, 2 unguided rockets, no guidance system, no active emissions, all 20 engaged, none reached hull. Intercept modes, SM-2 anti-ballistic mode, 9 neutralized. CIWS terminal engagement, 10 warhead detonations above ship, 640 to 1,600 meters altitude. 1 structural fragmentation without detonation. Personnel, 3 minor injuries, all returned to duty. Structural, SPY-6 forward sector degraded to 55%, conduit repair requiring dry dock. Fragment damage to forward deck, mast, aft antenna farm. No propulsion or seawater systems affected. Munitions expended. 9 SM-2 at $1.2 million to $10.8 million. CIWS, $41,000. Total, $25.8 million. Adversary cost, 20 Falak, 2 rockets at $4,000 each, $80,000. Exchange ratio, 323 to 1 in the adversary's favor. The highest ratio in this analysis series. The most successful defense in this analysis series. Both are true. Neither cancels the other. The rockets cost $4,000. The SM-2 cost $1.2 million. The adversary has trucks,